Okay, we're back on. I wanted to take you back a little bit to your war years, because you had said off camera that you worked with film during the war. Can you talk about that?
Well, I was on a troop ship from Charleston, North Carolina, or South Carolina, I don't know which. And we landed at Oran, Algeria. And the Arabs came out to greet us as we got on shore with great big oranges. We'd buy these big oranges, beautiful big oranges. And let's see, my first job in the Army, well, I drove a truck full of 500-pound bombs and a trailer full of 50 caliber ammunition for the fighter pilots. And I landed in Algiers, and had discovered that I was put in an outfit called the 13th Photo Intelligence Detachment. And I was in the squadron headed by, let's see, Roosevelt's, one of his sons, the spoiled son, Elliot. He was the colonel in charge of our outfit. And he was a maverick. But let's see. Headquarters for the war in that theater was in Algiers. And I got into the photographic intelligence section, S2. And let's see, what did I want to tell you about that? What was the question?
You used to show movies to troops?
Huh?
About film and movies, showing them to the troops.
Yeah, I was trained to be a moving picture cameraman in the Lowry Airfield, Air Base, near Denver. But up until I arrived at Algiers, I had no assignment, no job. So there they assigned me to the photo intelligence. And my superior officer was David Scott, who was the son of a fellow professor of my father's when he was at Pomona. And I knew David in Claremont there. He was an artist, a great artist. He became head of the Scripps College art department. But so I got put ahead by David. He took me into his outfit, which was a much better deal. And so his outfit was moved to Tunisia after the Germans were thrown out of Tunisia. And let's see.
Now, how did working with the film in the Army, how did that influence your later career, or did it?
Nothing. No. It was just, see, they didn't assign me to be a cameraman the way they did Clark Gable. You remember, he had an IMO and so on the bombing raids. they assigned me to a squadron, a reconnaissance squadron, and I would brief out pilots. I'd lay out their on the map. I would draw their route, what area they're to cover in a photograph, and behind the lines. And then when they came back, I had to interrogate them, make out a report, and send it to Algiers. And I remember one time the pilot came, well, let's see, that's early. I don't know where to go with so many things. Well, first, before David Scott took me into his outfit, I was carrying, in a weapons carrier, I was carrying a motion picture, 16 millimeter motion picture projector, and going around to the various camps and showing the soldiers the movies, latest movies, in 16 millimeter. And one time I was coming back from the air base, Maison Blanc, they call it, the airfield out there. And it was late afternoon, and it was just getting dark, and I was halfway into Algiers all by myself, and the sky just lit up ahead of me like 4th of July. Tracer bullets going up because the German bombers were raiding the city. So I stopped the car, got over to the side, and crawled underneath the car because some of these bullets that they were shooting up were coming down. They were this big around, and about that long. And they just come plopping all around, and so I got onto the car. And let's see. Well, I went to Tunisia, and I went AWOL on a B-17, one of the big bombers, because one flew into our airstrip at Tunisia, and the pilot let me get on and fly back to Algiers, just for the ride. But I was AWOL. They didn't catch me, but I had a nice ride on a bomber. I'd never been on a bomber before. And we landed, we moved to Italy after they took Sicily and southern Italy, and we landed at Salerno Beach, just behind the troops. And we ended up at an airstrip on the north side of Mount Vesuvius. And I got drunk for the first time in my life on the slopes of north slope of Mount Vesuvius, where there was a big house where the pilots were staying, and they having a Thanksgiving dinner there. And they served a lot of wine, and I remember when I got up to go into the room where they're going to give a play, I felt as if I were not on the ground. I was just floating as I was walking. It was a wonderful sensation.
When were you discharged?
Pardon?
Remember the year that you were discharged?
When I was discharged? Well, I went in at 42, came out at 45.
Now, when we left off at the last tape, we had been talking that you had graduated from Miami University.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you go from there?
Went to Hartford Seminary. Thought I was going to be an Episcopal minister. But after the first year, that's where I met my first wife, Ruth. She was studying for a career in religious education. And At the end of the year, I decided I didn't want to be a minister, to be on tap all day and night for other people's problems. I had enough of my own problems, so I fled to Hollywood. I really wanted to make movies. But I couldn't get a job making religious movies. I wasn't a member of the union. Couldn't get a job at any studio. So I went into, I worked selling Hoover vacuum cleaners at May Company. You heard of May Company? And then I went to USC to study cinema as a graduate student. Then.
Who did you study under at USC?
Pardon?
Who did you study under at USC?
I have his book, Slavko Vorkapich. He was head of the department at that time. He completely turned my head around. He showed me the great power of film that is subliminal, that you're not aware of when you watch it, called kinesthetic film forces or principles. The feeling of movement in your gut.
Did he give you an example of that? What would be an example of that in film?
I didn't understand.
What would be an example of that in film?
Well, an extreme example would be if a person had a camera in a roller coaster and he pointed the camera in front of him. You've seen these movies where you see that. Well, there's a great deal of movement all in one direction that's real fast and so on, and you begin to get a feeling. You get almost nausea sometimes. If it's a boat, you have a camera on a boat and the camera goes like this, you can get nauseous on the screen. You can feel the nausea in your gut. That's the extreme, but to know how to organize the movement and the cuts and so on, you can just get up below that nausea in excitement, and you can go up and down, just like with music. You can manipulate the nerves through the eye cells and the autonomic nervous system. You can manipulate those nerves down here, and by organizing what's on the screen visually, and that really was responsible for my success in film, because my first job was with Coca-Cola. I wanted to make films, and I was teaching up in Santa Barbara at a girls' school, at a prep school, and I was singing in the church choir. Sitting next to me was the tenor, and he was a chief engineer for Anderson Split Pea Soup Factory there in Santa Barbara. And he said, "Art, I see you're making films as a hobby. If you come down Sunday, I'll turn on all the machinery and send through some cans, and you bring your camera, and you can photograph the whole process. And we'll take it to Bob Anderson and see, because he's interested in doing some commercials and so on." So we did, and Bob Anderson loved it, but he wasn't in television at the time, so I went to Los Angeles and peddled the film. And I went to Darcy Agency. There, the head of the agency was was a motion picture producer at one time. Watch on the Rhine was one of his films. And he liked my film, and he said, Art, you go back to your garage and put some Coke bottles in there. So I had to make another spot with Coke bottles and ice cubes and stuff, using kinesthetic film principles. And he sent it to, it's black and white, 16 millimeters, no sound. He sent it to Coca-Cola headquarters in Atlanta. In a week or two, they sent back a whole slew of storyboards for 20-second, 30-second spots, and a dozen of them, and with a letter saying, don't let Art think that he has to follow these storyboards. I want him just to know exactly what we want to say and how we want to say it. But he is to rewrite the storyboards using his techniques. So I did, and I worked for Coca-Cola for making spots for about 3 years.
Can you describe one of the spots? If someone were looking at it, what would they see?
Well, okay, but just let me go beyond. The Anheuser-Busch people in St. Louis saw the Coke spots on the air across the country, and they called me one day. I was in my apartment, and they said, Art, can you come to St. Louis tomorrow? We want to discuss Budweiser spots with you. So I flew to there, and they gave me 16 spots to do. And oh, the spots, let's see, how do I describe them? Well, one, I made some Coke bottles dance in midair, suspended them with invisible steel wire. But it was a dance, and it ended up with the usual glass of Coca-Cola and so on. I don't know. The Budweiser spots were more interesting. I did some pixelation where I animated they were talking about doing chores around the house, and I animated a sponge washing a window, and I animated a regular window, and a lawnmower mowing the lawn all by itself, and we ended up with the bottle glasses of beer with the right size foam on each one going across the screen, and I can't describe the whole thing, but that's about all I can think of right now.
You use the term pixelation. What does that mean?
Animating furniture and people. Yeah.
Was anyone else doing it at the time?
Uh-huh. Yeah, at USC. Also, Norman McLaurin, who was the head of the film department of the government of Canada, he was doing a lot of that pixelation. He'd animate chairs and people and all kinds of things.
Now, how did you learn how to do this?
Learn how to do it? Just by doing it. Just copying what others had been doing. Norman McLaurin and so on. Oh, and of course I learned a lot the kinesthetic film principles from Slavko Vorkapich at USC. And then later, a few of us students, he resigned out of protest against the Alumni Association, taking his students away and putting them to work photographing sports things for them, for the alumni films and so on, because he wanted to teach them how to be film artists, and they were just recording sports and stuff, you know. So, yeah, I think Vorkapich is responsible for all my success, I think.
Did he see what you were doing for Coca-Cola? Is he still there?
I don't think so, no. He saw Gumbasia, the art film I made in 1952, 53. That I had made before I met him.
Can you describe that film?
Just colored clay in all shapes, abstract shapes, like balls and pyramids, and so sometimes amorphous shapes, just blobs of clay or long spaghetti-like pieces of clay and archways and so on. I had a ball of clay and a bunch of red arches of clay. The clay was that round and arched like that. And the ball was coming through the arches. and they put it in Playboy in the article called Sex and Cinema. It was really funny.
Was that the first time you had worked with clay in film?
Well, and doing a Budweiser spot, I had to photograph some cheese, Swiss cheese, and the Swiss cheese, you know, had holes in it and so on. So I had to make it would dry out under the hot lights. So I made it of clay instead of white clay, and imitated, put the holes in, and so on, just like Swiss cheese. Looked exactly like Swiss cheese on the screen, and then we were shooting in black and white, by the way, at those days, 35 millimeter, and the script called for the cheese being eaten by an invisible person. All you see is the teeth marks of the bite, as we animated the bite going into the cheese. And that's the first time I did work with clay that way.
Now, before we go into more of your television work, do you remember the first time that you saw television?
I'd have to think about that. No, but the Gumbasia, get back to the main film there, Gumbasia, I made that while I was at USC studying cinema, and it was made as a test film or an assignment, and I could have made it with people and so on, but I chose to do it in miniature with clay on a big ping pong table, and animate the clay and so on, because it was easier, faster, and cheaper. And that's the start of everything, really, Gumby.
Why did you call it Gumbasia?
Because on my grandfather's farm up north of Detroit in Michigan, my father would come in and say when they were late for supper or something, they got stuck in the rain in the gumbo, the clay soil. The dirt roads in those days were dirt, clay and so on. So when it gets wet, it gets mucky. It's clay, actually. And so that's why I used the word gumbasia, fantasy in clay, like Fantasia. And
Now, who saw it?
who saw it? Well, I showed it to Vorka Pitch. And later I got a job teaching at Harvard Military Academy, which is now Harvard School. It's no longer a military academy. And I had the job of tutoring one of the students there named Charlie Engel, who was the son of Sam Engel, who was a president of the Motion Picture Producers Association. You probably read all this. And he was producing a film with Sophia Loren at the time. And he liked what I was doing for his son. And he invited me to the studio, 20th Century Fox, and he said, bring along your little film, which was Gumbasia. I'd mentioned to him. He projected it in the big projection room there at the studio, and he paced back and forth in front of the screen after seeing it the first time. And he said, Art, that's the most exciting film I've ever seen in my life. And he said, Art, we've got to go into business together. So I had visions of mingling with the big stars as his assistant, Sophia Loren and so on. But in the next sentence he said, can you make little figures out of that clay and animate them and so on? I said, yeah, well, I want to improve the quality of television for children. I don't like what's I don't think they're giving the children something on television that they ought to have. And so, can you set up production and do all this and so on? I said, yes. So he said, I will finance a pilot film if you can do everything else. So I did.
Let's stop there to change the tape.
Mm-hmm.